Hello and welcome to the EDH Academy podcast. My name is Jay, and I thank you for joining me for episode 4 of a bi-weekly Magic podcast regarding all topics within the Commander format. Whether we're talking about upcoming sets or products and what they mean for the format, upcoming rule change and what that's going to mean for your deck, as well as strategies and how to counter set strategy if you ever encounter them. Briefly before we start today's episode, today we just got the themes and colors for the upcoming Commander product for 2018. And needless to say, Magic did it again. They outdid themselves, the themes are unique, the colors are something we're familiar with. So there are only going to be 4 decks this year. We know they're going to be blue-red artifacts called Exquisite Invention, black-green-red lands called Nature's Vengeance, white-blue-green enchantments called Adaptive Enchantment, and white-blue-black Subjective Reality, which is dealing with a lot of cards being on top of your library, what they mean for your strategy, and what they mean for the future. We're not actually going to know more about it until July 23rd when we actually start getting preview cards for them, so I'm super excited to see what they're going to be. It's very exciting from a deck building perspective because it's giving us a lot of cards to work with themes we are already familiar with, especially with the artifacts and the enchantments. Both of those themes fit very naturally within the colors, so I'm hoping for a very exciting Commander season. The Commander products come out on August 10th, but our first real peek into the products is on July 23rd, so be keeping an eye out on Twitter, Facebook, other forms of social media for those type of details. So today's podcast is going to be a little bit different than what we normally do. We've talked about what the Commander format is like, what to be thinking about when building decks. We went a little bit into what it was like to go to our first Grand Prix. But this time, we're going to be doing what I'm calling a strategy tech. Now, if you've consumed Magic product in the past, you may have seen what are called deck techs, where people will go over a deck, what cards are in the deck, the strategies going for it, things you're going to want to keep in mind, and more importantly, what's going to be within the deck. But I feel that within the Commander format, with so many different legendary creatures, the partner mechanic allowing us to combine them in so many different ways, I feel that attempting to do a deck tech for each individual commander is going to limit our scope, because many commanders have several different strategies, and some commanders don't actually get to see a lot of play because maybe they were made in the earlier days of Magic and they're not costed as competitively as other cards are. So instead, we're going to be focusing on a strategy, what that strategy wants to do, how you can detect that strategy when playing at the table, and we're going to do something a little bit different when it comes to, and we're going to take a slightly different analytical approach towards the end of the episode. So in today's strategy tech, we're going to be talking about the Voltron strategy. The Voltron strategy's namesake comes from the 1980s animated series and now present Netflix series Voltron Legendary Defender, where 5 mechanized alliance were able to transform and become one large mech known as Voltron and defeat evil at the end of the episode. So what the Voltron strategy does is that it takes a single creature and it suits it up with either equipments or auras, and they go in as your heavy fighting force, go in and eliminate your opponent through combat damage. So, as suggested earlier, there are 2 main sub-themes to the Voltron strategy. The first one is equipment-based, and the second one is aura-based. When it comes to the equipment-based strategy, it's about searching out your deck for the equipment you're going to want, suiting them onto a creature. The creature doesn't have to be anything really special, because a lot of the equipments that we have in Magic give it keywords that we like. Double strike, flying, trample, menace, unblockable, keywords like that. So, and also certain equipments will, not only that, but certain equipments also give our equipped creature a power boost. Cards like Loxodon Warhammer, which gives our creature +3/+0 trample and lifelink. So what we want to do is be getting all these equipments out, putting them onto a creature and attacking. So it's fairly simple strategy, and there are a lot of synergy cards that go along with this equipment heavy strategy. Within the white color itself, we get a lot of cards that searches out equipments, puts them onto the battlefield, makes them cheaper to cast, makes them cheaper to equip, if not eliminates the equip cost altogether, allows us to equip at instant speed. There are a lot of synergies within white that go along with the strategy. Now, what's interesting and unique about the artifact version of Voltron is that it actually can be ran in any combination of colors because a lot of the key cards, which are the equipments, are colorless in their cost to cast and colorless in their cost to equip. So we can actually build a Voltron strategy in any combination of colors. Now, I highly recommend that if you're choosing the equipment version of this strategy, to go within at least starting with white, if not going with white-red, only because white-red has a very aggressive strategy as it is. Red giving it the ability to double the damage it deals in combat, gives us extra combat steps, gives our creatures haste, gives our creatures trample. There are just more ways to be able to give us an offensive punch that white normally just gives us the creatures to deal the combat damage and the way to grab the artifacts and a way to grab the equipments from our deck. The Aura Voltron strategy is very similar to its equipment counterpart, with the exception of the fact that it actually has to do the suiting up in a very different fashion. With equipments, we have the option to be able to re-equip the equipments onto a new creature should it die, but with auras, we actually have to ensure that the one we're enchanting actually lives, because there are far fewer support cards when it comes to re-equipping auras than there are ways to recover artifacts from the graveyard. So the aura strategy focuses a lot on getting a creature with either some protection or an easy way to give it protection, like just hexproof or protection from certain colors, because once it gets protection from colors that are going to destroy it, or protection from things like instances and stuff like that, or ways to regenerate itself, then it's able to actually pose as a long-term threat and requiring your opponents to respond to it in a way that isn't just targeted removal. And that's why when you see the aura-based strategies, you actually may see it in multiple colors, mostly including green-white, because green-white has a lot of the auras that are going to give our creatures trample, hexproof, power boosts, vigilance, flying, ways to allow the creature to get in and deal damage. Not only that, but green-white actually has access to a series of cards known as enchantresses. These are creatures and enchantments that respond to enchantments coming into play, literally by just having you draw cards off of it. So there are a series of them that do it on cast, and one of them, Eidolon of Blossoms, that does it when it enters the battlefield. So the enchantresses are what gives the aura decks a little bit of an edge up against the equipment version, because they are able to recover the cards they played from their hand by drawing cards in response to playing the enchantments, which are what they're going to want to do. And it's not just the aura spells they draw off of, they also draw off of the defensive or offensive enchantments that they are playing to either increase their mana protection, get rid of a troublesome non-land permanent, or to lock down a creature from being able to do anything effective or disruptive to their strategy. Now, green-white by itself is a very strong color combination for aura-based Voltron decks, but there is also a creature known as Mural the Mistwalker. It is a creature that gets +2/+2 for each aura attached to it, and it naturally has hexproof. So when you're seeing that type of enchantment strategy where they're just throwing enchantments onto something, be thinking about how to handle that in a way that your deck naturally will want to do so. If you're thinking about building the aura-based Voltron strategy, I highly recommend that you do invest into green-white as being part of your color identity. As far as what your third color is, you can actually go in any other one color. If you go red, you get access to a lot of very combat-centric creatures. You have like Yahiji Honored One, where it gives itself +2/+0 when you're attacking someone. You get Earl Mistwalkers, I mentioned before, but you also just have access to a lot of creatures who do some heavy damage. And like I mentioned earlier, red promotes in both their auras and in the spells they have, dealing heavy damage, getting extra combat steps, and ways to help you win the game from there. Now, if you want to give yourself a little bit of an evasive route, but also give you access to cards to slow your opponent down, if you go to the blue route, I know that they have the Aura Aqueous form, which makes your creature unblockable. There's also Curious Obsession from Ixalan, where when you attack, you draw a card and it gives it a minor boost. There's Arcane Flight, which gives it +1/+1 in flying. So there's a number of ways to... In blue, there's a number of ways to prevent your opponent from being able to block your creature effectively. If you want to give yourself some defensive outs, there is black. The only reason why I would recommend going into the black route is if you already have the green-white shell, but you're also looking for ways to either look through your deck to search cards that you need, draw cards, or deal with creature threats. If you're in a creature-heavy meta, that'd be the only reason why I would suggest going into black. Otherwise, as far as ranking what your third color would be, I would recommend red, then blue, then black. If you absolutely positively have to only go in one color as far as the aura-based strategy goes, I recommend only going into green because they have the largest presence of enchantress abilities where drawing cards off of enchantments being cast or put into the battlefield. They also have a lot of access to hexproof creatures, which is going to be one of the more valuable keywords that you want to have stapled onto a green creature, and a lot of their auras in green are dealing with power boosts, including one of the most famous auras of all time, which is rank. So that's quite a bit of information. We got two different deck styles operating similarly but differently. It's a lot to go over, it's a lot to think about. So let's just take a little bit of a mental break, let it sit, let it kind of marinate, and we'll be back in a bit. So now that we have an idea of what the Voltron strategy wants to do, I'm going to take things into a little bit of a different direction. Now I'm going to be talking about how to counter that strategy should you ever encounter it in your play group. Because not only is it important enough to get behind the eyes of someone and see what they're trying to do if you want to go for that strategy, I feel it's equally important to have a game plan if you counter it in your play group and you're trying to find a way to counter it with your own strategy. So to begin off, as we did in the episode with the equipment version of the strategy, the equipment version of the strategy is entirely dependent on getting the equipments out and equipping them onto a creature. Now, normally in combat-based strategies, it's about the creatures and getting rid of them. However, because the equipment-based strategy is all about getting multiple equipments onto one creature, because that's the most effective way for them to win the game, getting rid of their artifacts either entirely or getting rid of the ones that are the most dangerous. So you're looking at things that give them hexproof or protection from a certain color, or flying menace, something that prevents them from being blocked. Those are the artifacts you're going to want to get rid of, because the ones that give them double strike, the ones that give them trample, maybe a power boost, even lifelink, yes, those are annoying, but those equipments don't create a bubble around the equipped creature. It just simply makes them more advantageous for combat, but at the end of the day, you can still get rid of them. So if there's a creature out there that's a 7/5 with trample, lifelink, first strike, all you would need is a double striking death toucher to, now make that attack not seem profitable. Now, a double striker with death touch or a first striker with death touch is a bit to ask for in a main deck creature to deal with something like that. But the point I was trying to make was that as long as the creature can be removed outside of combat, because you're getting rid of the key equipments that the deck wants to be pulling out and getting onto the board, you're going to find that that player is a lot more manageable because you're getting rid of those key equipments. You can go ahead and let them get the artifacts from their deck. You could allow them to get it onto the field as long as you have a way of getting rid of it through some sort of single interaction or wide interaction. Now, if you're in green, white, and red, you should have some artifact removal in there, whether you're in red having strictly artifact removal. I know a lot of your stuff is at sorcery speed unless you're running cards like a Braid, which is instant speed removal. Green and white should have more versatile removal in that their artifact removal is also enchantment removal. So always running a few pieces of artifact removal is going to be a good thing to have, because even if you don't go up against this equipment base of a Voltron strategy at all, getting rid of a key enchantment or artifact your opponent has, there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't. Now, as far as blue and black is concerned, I know you're not going to have a lot of cards that are dealing with the equipment specifically, so in your particular case, I would find ways to have them sacrifice the attacking creature, sacrifice it altogether, or if they're just running too many utility creatures, just be looking for ways to destroy all creatures. Unless you have ways of getting rid of Hexproof and Shroud, like Glaring Spotlight, Hurricane Lighthouse. I believe there is another land that just came out in 2018 that also gets rid of Hexproof. Getting rid of the creature is all you can really do in black, so I just recommend you doing the best you can in that regard. Blue, if your main color is blue, you have the option to bounce things. So what you could do is put your opponent into a false sense of security where they think they're able to just swing advantageously, then get rid of the artifact that's causing you the trouble, and then get rid of the creature from there. That'll at least buy you some time to be able to search for a counterspell or some sort of other form of interaction, either wide interaction or single interaction, because they have to re-equip those equipments once they get that creature out, or if there's another creature already out, they have to pay the mana cost to get those equipments on. It'll at least buy you some time to either win you the game, establish a stronger board state to where you're not the one being attacked, or you have a counterspell answer for the equipment that was giving you trouble. Now, much like the fact that this version of Voltron operates differently than its colorless-based counterpart, the aura-based strategy is actually weakest at its creature point. So if you're able to deal with the creature that's being enchanted with all of the auras, you can actually set back the aura player quite a bit. One thing to keep in mind as well is if any of the enchantments that are enchanting the main attacker have the word totem armor on it. What totem armor means is that if the enchanted creature would be destroyed, you could sacrifice that enchantment instead. So that's going to give the creature an opportunity to be saved from being destroyed without having to regenerate, without having to be given indestructible or damage prevention, and it's going to slow down your game plan and ensure that theirs are not interrupted. So you'll want to make sure to be targeting those totem armor enchantments first to ensure that when you do destroy the creature in question, you're actually able to thoroughly remove them versus simply just getting rid of the enchantments. Now, if for some reason you don't have an answer to the totem armor, balancing the creature will be equally as effective in accomplishing your goal in removing the threat. So that is kind of your plan A in stopping a Voltron strategy. Now, if for some reason you're not getting a hold of your removal, or you're in the deck building process and you know that there's a Voltron player in your meta, if you really want a plan B, the Voltron strategy is a combat-based deck. So the main way that you will deal with it outside of removing the attacker is by taxing them for attacking. So now they have to make a decision on how they spend their mana. Now the concern is that they are often on a single attacker game plan, so having effects like Silent Arbiter or Duelist Grounds where it limits the attacking and defending creatures to one, that's not going to really matter to a Voltron player because they only have one creature that they want to attack with, and that thing is big, it's threatening, and it wants to end the game real quick. So you're going to want to find a way to make it to where it is as hard as possible for them to actually attack you. So effects like Ghostly Prison, Propaganda, Sphere of Safety, Windborne Muse, those effects where they can't attack you unless they pay so much mana. In Dominaria, they actually got a legendary creature that has the effect of creatures your opponent controls can't attack you unless they pay 1 for each. Now, it's only 1 mana. If you have several of them layering up on top of each other, sooner or later your opponent becomes out-taxed from being able to attack you, and they'll want to start addressing other people at the table. And that is going to do it for us for episode 4 of the EDH Academy podcast, where we took a look at the Voltron strategy, both the equipment and the aura version, and got an idea of what the deck was wanting to do, what colors are going to promote that strategy, and how to deal with it if we ever encounter it at our local game store. I would like to thank the Twitter user at Plains Project for designing our podcast logo. It is super awesome, and he is an amazing fellow. Be sure to check out his work on YouTube. If you have any questions or wish to contact me, I can be found at Twitter at EDH_Academy or by email at edhacademymedia@gmail.com. Please, 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 please comment and like this episode. The more feedback I get, the more I understand of what you are liking about these episodes, the more I can promote that style of content creation, and I can just continue on improving and making this podcast geared towards you, the listener, and geared towards you, the EDH player. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.